Welcome to today's show. MSTR buys more, BMNR buys more. We're going to jump in and see what's happening here in the new year. Also, Venezuelan president gets arrested, and Bitcoin crosses over $94,000 for the first time in a little while. What does Bitcoin need to hold at for us to continue to rally? We're going to talk about that as well. And we've seen some movement up in the BMNR price for sure. We're going to talk about that as well. So not tax advice, not financial advice, not legal advice. Do your own research, and I'm going to jump in right now. Okay, so take a look at what's going on. Strategy continues to buy 1,287 Bitcoin to increase its Bitcoin reserve. They now have 673,783 Bitcoin. And the USD reserve, they've increased that as well. They've now got $2.2 billion in cash. So any considerations about them being able to pay dividends on their preferreds like Stride and Strife and Strike, well, they've got a USD reserve now. So that is good news for Strategy. They continue to buy consistently. Nothing stops this man, Michael Saylor. To start 2026, that's their buy, $116 million worth of Bitcoin. And now they own what I just shared, $62 billion worth of Bitcoin approximately. They own more than 3% of all Bitcoin that will ever exist. Strategy, that is a big accomplishment. In late 2025, we saw Bitcoin fall more than 23%, and Strategy showed a $17 billion paper loss. So let's see how Strategy continues into the new year. We saw a nice run up to about 164, 165, and now it dropped down again to 155. So again, I think we really personally need to see Bitcoin go above 95,000 to kind of break that threshold. We have not broken this in a long time, and we do need to see something like that happen. Strategy has increased their USD reserve, but for Strategy to really run, we need to see Bitcoin really go bullish. And right now, there's a little bit of signs of Bitcoin going up. But we're not seeing a real bullish run at this point. So, the jury's not out on this. So Strategy is doing both. They're holding Bitcoin for the future, and they're holding cash for safety. That is definitely smart risk management with what they're doing. Let's also talk about BMNR right now. You look at BitMine. We know they have their big shareholder vote coming up in like 10 days. They're requesting for an authorization of 50 billion shares. Which is a huge increase from 500 million. In my previous video, I talked all about that. We know that BitMine wants to control 5% of the supply of Ethereum, and that's their goal. And that's the reason why they're asking for an authorization of 50 billion, so they don't have to ever ask again, and they can issue shares when they want. When they're issuing shares above the net asset value of their Ethereum, it is accretive for shareholders, and that's what we want them to do. If they ever issue below, it is not accretive and is not good. But in the main, for the last 6 months, they've been doing that, which is really, really good and exciting. So we know that they continue to follow what they have said they're going to do, and they continue to do it consistently. So that's good news as well. So with that said, this is what their holdings are right now, $14.2 billion in total crypto. And moonshots, the majority of that is Ethereum. So if you look at their Ethereum holdings are about $13 billion. And we know that they are holding cash of 915 million, waiting for an opportunity to deploy that, it looks like. So that's what's happening. We'll see what happens on January 15th. The question is, are you voting yes or no for the increase in shares, authorized shares? And also, let's not forget, just because they want to authorize more shares doesn't mean they're issuing $50 billion at once. They just want the right to do it as they please to hit their 5% of the ETH supply target, which is what they've been going for all along. So I still love the strategy of what they're doing. I'm still bullish about BMNR, and their price has not reflected what I think the stock is capable of. But again, you got to do your own research and decide what's best for you on that. But one day I expect big things for BMNR. But we have not seen a huge rally coming. We've seen a little bit of rally, but the verdict's not out. We got to see Ethereum run up. We got to see more bullishness around Ethereum and Bitcoin, and then BMNR would follow. So that's basically where we're at with the game right now. And let's get more into specifics. Also, if you would like to grab a copy of my Money Game book, you can snag it down below. And you can get it down below. You just put your name, email, and cell, and you can get a copy of my book, which is good. It's all about BMNR, MSTR, and also Ethereum and Bitcoin. Also, when you do go grab that, you can actually you can actually snag when you go grab it. You can actually snag a copy of my trading strategy, which is down below also, which is exciting too. So go ahead and look to do that. Okay. All right. So with that said, okay, good. I'm going to stop sharing this here. Cool. All right. Somehow I have lost. Here we go. We're back. Okay, cool. So wanted to make sure you see it. You can grab that down below as well. So let's get back to the screen here. Okay. So now you look at BitMine, 32,977. Ethereum now owns 4,143,502 ETH. So it's worth about 13 billion. So they continue to acquire the ETH. That's no secret at all. And that's about 3.4% of all the Ethereum. Now their goal is to hit 5% of the supply, and they continue to buy to do that. So that is positive, and that's what we're looking to see accomplished. Okay. So they're not just holding ETH, as you know. They've got 659,000 that is staked. So there's been a lot of conversation about BMNR and staking Ethereum. And the conversation over the last year has been when they decide to stake their ETH, which with 13 billion of ETH, if they were to stake all of that at a 3% return on that, that would be about, $400 million or so of income coming into the company every year. So that makes the stock stronger from my viewpoint, because now they're not just holding ETH in their treasury, but they're also bringing income into the company. So they've already started to stake some ETH, 659,000 ETH, and that is ETH that's locked into the network. It cannot be sold quickly. So that is very good news because it shows their long-term commitment to their strategy. Staking, if you don't know what that is, it helps run Ethereum. It also earns more Ethereum for them, and it reduces the selling pressure because they're staking it. So if you take a look at BMNR and you take a look at MSTR, you see BitMine steadily acquiring Ethereum. Again, the alchemy of 5%, they're still going that, controlling 3.4% now. If you look at this number, this is since 10/31/2025, so since October, after the big crash we had on 10/10 that totally dumped the market. And you look at their acquisition of ETH, 2,406, but you multiply that by millions, because this graph is done in millions, and that's $2 billion worth, 2,400,000,000. Okay, so 2.4 billion. You look at MSTR, their acquisition is 2,891. That's in millions. That would be close to 3 billion. And then you look at other companies down below here who are digital asset treasury companies, and nobody compares to these two that are continuing to acquire. Okay. Strategy owns 673,000 Bitcoin. BitMine owns 4,143,000 ETH. So they're very comparable in the supply that they own. Just remember that BMNR has done this in 5 or 6 months of acquiring Ethereum, and Strategy's done it in 5 years. Strategy was the leader, and they paved the path, and BitMine is basically deploying the MSTR playbook. You see this excitement around BMNR being the new kind of chip on the block here. Strategy's been doing it for 5 years. We know that there's been bearishness about Strategy over the last 3, 4, 5 months. So I don't expect Strategy to really run up unless we see a Bitcoin run. I do know that there's lots of accumulation of Strategy and BMNR by institutions over the last year. More and more, when we look at Strategy, last I checked was about 50% of the investors in it are institutions. BMNR has been growing their institutional investors, over the last several months. So this definitely is a different game that we're experiencing right now, and we're seeing in the marketplace. Institutional investors are in. It's a whole new world. Wall Street's in, and so it's a whole new game. And we'll see what happens for 2026. Nobody knows what's really going to happen. You have banks like Standard Chartered, which is very, very conservative. They think Bitcoin's still going to hit 150,000 this year, although they lowered their price targets. Their price targets were higher, and now they've lowered them. Morgan Stanley is still calling for $170,000 Bitcoin, but I think you need to look at all of this with a microscope and just decide for yourself what you think is going to happen, because nobody knows what's going to happen, even the large institutions, because all the models that we thought were going to happen have died. and now we're in a new game. My personal viewpoint is I'm just holding on to strategy for the long term right now. I'm holding on to BMNR for the long term, and holding on to Bitcoin, as I've been holding Bitcoin for years and years and years. So both these companies, what they have in common, they're still buying during the fear. So when I look at the long-term viability of these companies over a 4-year time horizon, BMNR, MSTR, they're buying during fear. They're ignoring the short-term price drops, and they're thinking in years, not weeks. Saylor's always made it clear that that's how he's thinking. Unfortunately, as retail holders, who hold the stock, many people are not thinking in those time horizons. They want it now. We all want it now, but that's not the reality of where the company's right now. Okay. So they're thinking in years and not weeks. They're probably even thinking in decades as well, by the way they're deploying their strategies. And then you take a look at what's happening in the news right now, because obviously what's happening politically shifts events. What's happening with the Fed shifts events. What's happening in the economy shifts events. So we see that this news that just came in with what happened in Venezuela is a big deal. I'm sure everybody's heard of this. The United States launched military action in Venezuela and captured the country's leader, Maduro. What does this have to do with Bitcoin? We're going to get there in a second. This didn't come out of nowhere. It was a result of many years of pressure, warnings, legal action. And surprisingly, as that happened, we saw Bitcoin move above $94,000. Why is that the case? I'll go into some speculation about that as it relates to Venezuela and their Bitcoin holdings. So this event definitely moved the crypto markets, and we saw this a couple days ago move it. And now Bitcoin's back down to about 92,000. Venezuela got in trouble. If you go back to 1999, you look at their leader, Chavez, took power in Venezuela. The government became very strict. The military took control of big parts of the economy, and corruption started to spread. And during those years, Venezuela became an important route for illegal drugs. So drugs are moving across the world. And by the mid-2000s, you had top military leaders who controlled airports and ports. You had drug shipments all over the place. You had money flowing upward to powerful people. And it wasn't just street crime. It was like a state-protected system. So in March 2020, the U.S. made a huge move. They officially charged Maduro with drug trafficking, narco-terrorism, sending cocaine into the U.S. A $50 million reward was placed on him. Why this happened now? Well, from 2020 to 2025, sanctions increased, diplomacy failed, drug routes stayed active, and Maduro stayed in power. And from the U.S. point of view, legal pressure without action wasn't working anymore. Venezuela holds the largest oil reserves on earth. Maduro reportedly, we're not sure if this is true, offered oil deals to reduce the pressure. The U.S. said no, because negotiating with a charged criminal reduces leverage, locks in bad deals. So instead, the U.S. chose pressure first, control later. And here's how it unfolded. Explosions were reported. U.S. helicopters were seen over Caracas. Emergency declared. Maduro and his wife were captured, and charges were confirmed within hours. Everything changed. And right after the news, Bitcoin jumped above 92,000. That was a $4,000 rise from the lows, and the crypto market added $130 billion from that news. Wasn't panic buying. This was the market saying risk just shifted. So here's the part most people missed. Venezuela may is the word, secretly hold hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin. How? Swapping gold for Bitcoin, forcing oil payments in USDT, and quietly converting that into Bitcoin. So this puts Venezuela, okay, estimated Bitcoin holdings of major entities. If you look at Satoshi, you got 1,100,000. You look at BlackRock, 770,000 Bitcoin. You look at Strategy, 672,000 Bitcoin. You look at Venezuela, 600,000. So that's the report. Let's see if it's true. And the U.S. government down below with 325,000. So if the U.S. seizes that Bitcoin from Venezuela, what could happen? That means the U.S. government stack could go to 1 million, which would be a big deal. So who knows if that'll happen? We'll see if that's true. But this could be a big deal for the U.S.'s reserve of having 1 million potential Bitcoin if they seize that from Venezuela and they do add it to their stash. So we shall see. If you also look at this chart and you look at BlackRock with 770,000 Bitcoin, you look at Strategy with 672. If you really look at the magnitude of where BlackRock was 2 years ago, and there were no ETFs at that time, and now you look at the accumulation, look how much Bitcoin BlackRock has accumulated. So if you look at the long term of where Bitcoin's going and the future of what these financial industries believe in terms of Wall Street and the largest financial institutions on the planet like BlackRock, clearly they believe in Bitcoin. Clearly they believe in the blockchain. And clearly you see that by the movement of many, many large institutions onto the blockchain. And so, I don't think anybody expected this to happen this fast in terms of large institutions getting in the game and the accumulation of strategy accumulating Bitcoin. I don't think anybody expected this much accumulation of Bitcoin. I don't think anybody expected ETH treasury companies to come on the scene and Solana treasury companies. So if you zoom out and you look just at a macro perspective, you really see that we've got a complete change in the world of finance, and you've got traditional finance, and now you've got digital finance, and the two worlds are merging. And if you watch some of my previous videos, there's some just large things that are happening in just the global infrastructure of finance moving onto the blockchain. And the letters are written on the wall. It's just very simple. I mean, if you want to have a more secure network than the current financial network, the blockchain is the answer. If you want to move payments at the speed of seconds versus days, if you want settlement to happen faster, if you want to be a global financial company that's not restricted just to your physical location or your locations that you're limited to per the laws, and you want to cross borders and have customers all across the planet, and then if you want to hold hard assets like Bitcoin that are truly scarce and truly finite compared to the rest of the assets on the planet, it just makes sense that this is where the world's moving. And so traditional finance has really made up their mind this is where they're going, and we have not seen this in terms of the price reflection at this point yet. So perhaps that happens in 2026. Perhaps that happens on a gradient over the next 2, 3, 4 years. But we do know that it is happening. So that's the good news for the long-term outlook on Bitcoin, strategy, BMNR, Ethereum. All right, why this matters for the U.S. If the U.S. recovers these Bitcoin reserves, they could be added to a U.S. strategic Bitcoin reserve, and the U.S. could approach 1 million Bitcoin held if they do add. If Venezuela, in fact, did have that amount of Bitcoin and they do add it to their reserves, that would be the case. So that would completely change global Bitcoin power, national reserve strategy, how other countries would respond. So let's see what happens. So whales are bullish on Bitcoin from Crypto Goose here. And this is a post that they put on here, Bitcoin realized cap for new whales, as you can see the chart here. And so that is good for Bitcoin. So that's the basic news going on in the marketplace right now. And we will see what happens in the new year. And in terms of what's going to happen in 2026, and let's see if there's good news, and let's see if the bullish momentum continues into 2026. So far, we don't know if this is going to continue. It's just the first few days, and we'll see ultimately what's going to happen. So you guys have a great rest of the year. Hope you have a phenomenal 2026, and I will talk with you all soon. If you want to grab my book down below, you can get my money game book and my trading strategy is down below. And I'll see you soon. Okay.